Questions? Are we going? Yep, we're going here. Where are we at? Oh, I'm like a third base. Oh, my pencil. I think we're on page 3. But correct me if I'm wrong.
We finished the last question on, I think we finished 9 and then we are at.
Okay, so we finished 9. Excellent. Yep, because we talked about Dream Home Makeover and trading spaces. Excellent. Good job. Okay, so John 1. So open up your Bibles to John 1. Like I
can be a pencil sharpener when I can use pencils. Oh my god.
And it goes into your grades. So it can have a really, it can have an effect on the grade. Okay, that was John 1, verses 14 through 18. Say this. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, full of grace and truth. Or to see his glory as of the glory of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This is he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me. For from his fullness, the fullness of Christ, we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God," that's referring to Jesus, "who is at the Father's side. Jesus has made God known." So, John begins this section by telling us that the Word, Jesus, became a man and made his dwelling among us. The word for "made his dwelling among us" literally means pitched his tent, or more literally, tabernacled amongst us. One theologian calls this verse one of the most important verses in the Bible. And it is. For the Jews and for us, this phrase has profound meaning. So now we're going to Exodus 25. And I'm beginning at verse 8 and reading through verse 9. "And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst, exactly as I show you concerning the pattern of the tabernacle and of all its furniture, so shall you make it." So what is John's deeper meaning in this? He says that Christ became flesh and tabernacled among us. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. To be with us, to be present with us. So the word for dwelt actually is skinu. It's kind of an interesting word. And so the word Jesus dwelt, skinu, among us and revealed his doxa, his glory. That's exactly what God did in the tabernacle. He dwelt among his people and he showed his glory. You see how John is making a connection between the dwelling of God with man in the tabernacle and the dwelling of God with man in the form of Jesus Christ. That's the comparison. So the tabernacle was the place, the center of God's dwelling with Israel. So here's the wonder of these verses in John 1. John is saying that during Christ's time on earth, from his birth forward, he was the place where God dwelt. He was the place where God dwelt with Israel and on earth. So just as God once dwelled with them in the tabernacle, he now, when Christ was on the earth, dwelled in the flesh in Christ. And the glory of God, which was once restricted to the tabernacle, was now visible. We beheld his glory, glories of the Son. And John is possibly talking about that when he says we beheld his glory, possibly talking about the transfiguration. I don't know it for sure, but that's a likely candidate for that. So, what is the significance of John saying that no one has ever seen God? Yeah, no one's ever seen his full glory. So before Christ, no one could ever look at God and live. They couldn't see the fullness of his glory. And yet John tells us that the fullness of the glory of God dwelt in Christ. So when you were looking at Christ, you were looking at the fullness of the glory of God. And they could see him. And he said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And Jesus said that. Pretty in verse 15, John tells us why Jesus is superior to John the Baptist. What is the reason? Yes. Right. So, and that when you get to memorizing that part, it can get kind of dicey, where it says, in the word being flesh and blood among us, John bore witness about him, and said, "He who comes after me." So, who was older, like in terms of age? Who was older? Yeah, John. John was born a few months before Jesus, so he who was born after me, ranks before me, is more important because he was before me. Because John realized that Jesus didn't come into existence at his birth. Jesus has always been. Jesus never came into existence. He has always been. So basically, what he's saying is he is greater. Just what he said to his disciples in John 2, he must become greater and I must become less. Because he is God. He has always been. So when he says he who came after me ranks before me because he was before me, literally means because he has always been. So Christ was both before and after John the Baptist. He was chronologically after John. In other words, he was younger by a little bit. But unlike John, Jesus was pre-existent. So he has always been. And he is God, and therefore much greater than John the Baptist. Verse 18 tells us that Jesus, the incarnate Word, has made God known. The prologue of John's Gospel paints a vivid portrait of the relationship between God the Father and Jesus. Reviewing the verses, you have read this today. These were done over a series of days. How would you describe and explain the relationship? That's a tough question. Take it on? Yeah. Thanks.
Right. I just said Jesus is the Son of God and God in him. He was distinct from and was God. And the Father sent the Son, the Son the Son to be the
Yeah, and you can't wrap your head all the way around all of that. At least we can't yet. But yes, they're both intimately connected and working in concert with one another, but distinct from one another at the same time. I would add that Jesus reveals God perfectly. When you see Jesus, you see his words and deeds are the words and deeds of God. So in Christ, God was fully present, walking around in full view of everyone. and yet most people didn't recognize it. Jesus has made God known to us. To see Jesus is to see God. So Jesus was no mere man. He was not some prophet or a good teacher. We'll talk about later on. Actually, next year, we'll talk about a quote from C.S. Lewis where he says that you can't call him a good teacher. Why you can't call him a good teacher? He's different from every other person who ever lived because Jesus is God. He was God in the flesh, and Jesus is God. So remember the question that John is asking: who is this God? Who is the Messiah? And most emphatically, in John 1:18, in this prologue of John, John is telling us that the answer is Jesus. Who is the Messiah? It's Jesus. Any questions? Okay, we're just going to keep going right on and open up your books, please, to chapter 5.
So
Yeah, oh, sure.
sorry. Number 10. I didn't know, like it says that like Jesus wanted to make us a for men. And like I meant like as Jesus wanted to dwell with man, he wanted us to dwell in him. That's what I put.
Yeah, no, it is. It's this, he does dwell in us, but we also live in him as well. So there is, there's both are true. Yep, go fast. Okay, so starting with the introduction, we're going to actually do this student work together as a class. It's the traditional Christmas story. Little baby Jesus was born in a manger. The angels sang, announcing his birth. The shepherds came and worshipped him. The stars shone brightly over the house in Bethlehem. And the wise men followed, bringing him gold, frankincense, and myrrh in worship. Everyone went away rejoicing, but Mary pondered these events quietly in her heart. We enjoy the story. It gives us a warm, fuzzy feeling inside at the holiday season. We listen to the traditional Christmas carols as we decorate our trees, send out greeting cards, and purchase and wrap gifts for our loved ones. And then before we know it, it's all over. Back to the stores go the ill-fitting gifts. Into the trash goes the wrapping paper. Down comes the tree and all the decorations. Back to the shelves or boxes go the Christmas tapes and CDs. Back to work go parents. Back to school go the kids. Christmas is over for another year, never to be given a second thought until next year's shopping season begins again. That's how Christmas is for most people. Sadly, even for Christians. To them, baby Jesus in a manger is Christmas. A baby suddenly appears and causes a brief comforting commotion and then disappears. And people never give it another thought. The account has no lasting influence on them. After December, until next Christmas season, but is this really what Christmas is all about, or is a more important message in there somewhere? The story of the birth of Jesus is actually only a small part of the larger story of the life and ministry of Christ. And that relatively brief 33-year life is only a fraction of the larger plan of God for the ages. The birth of Christ marks what we call the incarnation. God the Son becoming a man so he could die for the sins of mankind. Just think about it. God the Son left the Father and all the glories of heaven and took on himself the body of a human with all of its problems and frailties. Or as Harold Willington puts it, the holy infinite creator agreed to wrap flesh and blood around his eternal being so he might enter this sin-cursed world and eventually die for sinful and finite creatures. But let's make it personal. Did that for you and for me. This lesson is a starting point in fully comprehending the ministry of Christ on earth. We can and must study it, but it staggers even the most brilliant Christian minds. Even the Apostle Paul found it to be a mind-boggling truth. Great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest. It's the true Christmas story that will last believers all year. So again, we will read John 1:14 through 18. And it says this. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This is he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me." For from his fullness, the fullness of Christ, we all have received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, Jesus, who is at the Father's side. He, Jesus, has made God known. So that's verses 14 through 18 of John 1. And now let's answer these questions together. And you can write the answers in your book as I can read them. Verse 14 says that the Word was full of grace and truth. What events can you think of in the Gospels that would show this fullness in Christ? Something that Jesus did that shows his grace and truth. Okay, so on the cross, specifically saying, "Father, forgive them," but the cross in general is true. I'm thinking of the woman caught in adultery, and uh, and he shows her grace, right? He prevents her from being stoned, and yet his last words to her were, "Go and sin no more." Grace and truth are evidence of that. So many healings. He raised Lazarus from the dead. He healed many people. He fed a multitude. But he also condemned the Pharisees. And he also spoke truth to those people that he healed. Verse 15 records John's proclamation that Jesus existed before him. What would you have thought about this statement if you heard it and knew John was 3 months older than Jesus? Yeah.
This guy crazy.
Yeah, you'd be confused, wouldn't you? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about, John? And maybe he explained more. I don't know. Yeah, it would sound like crazy talk. Verse 16 shows that Christ was not only full of grace and truth himself, but also shared these gifts with people. How do we receive his grace? Yeah, Albert.
coming to know him because that was the word.
So we receive his grace and truth when we receive him, right?
In his name,
Believe in his name, believe what he died for, following him. That was the way he put it with all his disciples. He just said, follow me. And we are still followers of Christ. We're called to follow. Faith is not just something up here, right? Faith is here and here and here. It is all of us. Jesus desires to have all of us. Is John implying in verse 17 that grace and truth are better than the law or just? Aubrey.
I guess it was like laws that you direct, but I think although not all laws are.
Yeah.
It's contrary. Law, but I think I might be misunderstanding.
Well, why do you say it's better than
Well,
law?
I think like Jesus says that above him there is no law. And it means like Jesus is the law, and therefore like the old law.
As a means of salvation, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It is.
the law, actually, Paul said this later, but he was saying that, maybe, but he was saying that with the law wasn't enough to keep you from sinning. It kind of established the goal, but it didn't help you. Jesus helps you reach the goal. So without Jesus, the law doesn't work. But with Jesus, the law does work. So Jesus completed the law.
Fulfilled the law.
Fulfilled
the law. Yeah. Allison.
We are physically doing
Yeah, it was a.
not only we also grace, truth, confirm what's the law. The law would be unready. About it. Commit adultery and not have to be committed. What is true?
Anybody else? It's really, really good thoughts. Yeah. Ten Commandments, basically. And the rest of the law that's teased out in the Ten Commandments. Yeah.
Well, the law was given to point out what the Israelites were doing wrong, but then Jesus brought grace and truth and showed them how to do it right.
Okay.
Well, and it also says that the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth was given through Jesus and through Christ. And so, like, even though God appointed to Moses to give the law, it's a different level of, like, higherness. Because if you
Yeah, I'm reading Romans 7, from like 15. For what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. What I hate, that I do. If then I do what I will not do, I agree with the law that does it. But now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me. But how to perform what is good, I do not find. For the good that I will to do, I do not do, but the evil I will not to do, that I practice. Now if I do what I will not to do, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. I find in the law that evil is present with me, the one who wills to do good. For I delight in the law of God according to the man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. And then he says, O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? I thank God through Jesus Christ.
Yeah. By the way, that body of death, a little gross Bible term trivia. It was actually that was a term that referred to a type of execution, and one of the ways they would punish someone who had murdered someone is to tie the dead body onto the person's body, and as that body decayed, their body would decay, and they would die. So that's a type of death. So that was called the body of death. And so Paul's using really, as he often does, and we don't realize it, really graphic imagery to talk about our sin. What?
Another guy.
Well, you didn't because that decaying flesh eats into their own. So here's the thing. Here's the actual answer given by the book. Answers will vary, but so I'm not. There's not like a right or wrong here necessarily. But I love the thoughts that you brought. But the purpose of the law was to show us that we can't keep the law. The purpose of the law was to show us that we need Jesus. And so I don't know if John would say that you know, the grace was greater or better than the law, because the law was necessary. Paul writes that as well. The law was necessary so that we would know what sin is. But Jesus was necessary so that we could actually be saved from that sin. So both are necessary, and I think it's hard to say. It's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg. I mean, it's hard to say which is greater. But you did a great job discussing it, and I really appreciate that. One of my biggest pet peeves as a teacher is to try to have discussion, and I'm looking out at a lot of kids doing like this. So I really appreciate it. Good job. Okay, is there anything that Christ was able to accomplish that the law could not? Seamus? Yeah. Yeah. And look at Galatians. We're going to look at a couple of places in Galatians. Start with Galatians 2. And everybody should know where Galatians is now. Memorize. Galatians 2, I'm going to read verses 15 and 16, and they say this. We ourselves are Jews by birth and not Gentile sinners, yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, not made right with God by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus in order to be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law, because by works of the law, no one will be justified. No one will be made right with God, because no one can keep it perfectly. And then chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. Say this. For all who rely on the works of the law are under a curse, for it is written, cursed be everyone who does not abide by all the things written in the book of the law and do them. Now, it is evident that no one is justified before God by the law, made right before God by the law. For the righteous shall live by faith. That's a quote. But the law is not of faith. The law is not of faith. Rather, the one who does them shall live by them. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree. So that in Christ Jesus, the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles, so that we might receive the promised Spirit. So, yes, absolutely. Christ accomplished our salvation. made us right with God. He made us right with God through the cross and the empty tomb. We can choose not to appropriate that, but He offered that justification to everyone because of that. So, and the law couldn't do that because we can't, as all of us have evidence every day of our lives. Any questions? It was in Galatians 2 and then Galatians 3. Galatians 2, I think I read more of 3 than 10 through 12. 2, 15 through 16, and then 3, 10 through 14. And then that's a picture of Bethlehem. Bethlehem as it looks today. It's pretty cool to see that. And that is it for today. A couple of minutes. Thanks.